Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining me today because, well, we are tackling something that affects literally every single one of us. Seriously, whether you're climbing a corporate ladder, leading a scrappy startup team, or just trying to figure out how to optimize your own personal potential, this is for you. Today, we're dismantling some deeply ingrained, heavily outdated performance paradigms. For decades, we've basically been programmed to believe that relentless, unwavering goal pursuit is the ultimate virtue. But we're going to look at how that exact mindset can actually morph into a really toxic goal obsession. And more importantly, we're going to replace those clunky old frameworks with dynamic, agile strategies that actually drive true success. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. First up, the danger of Goalodicy. Second, rethinking the annual review. Third, why fast beats smart. Fourth, the power of continuous coaching. And finally, kissing your ugly frogs. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The danger of Goalodicy. The risks of rigid goals.
Okay, so we usually think of goal setting as this incredibly safe, universally positive corporate activity, right? I mean, who doesn't love setting a good goal? But what happens when the environment around you drastically shifts and your goal just doesn't? Can a goal actually be fatal? Now, I know that sounds a bit dramatic, but it's a completely vital question. In our culture, doggedly pursuing a target is treated almost like a religion. We highly celebrate the people who never give up and just push through all obstacles no matter what. But is relentless goal pursuit always a virtue? Let's take a look at a historical example that proves it absolutely isn't.
Picture this, May of 1996. Several commercial climbing teams set out to summit Mount Everest. Among them were groups led by these world-class legendary guides Rob Hall and Scott Fisher. Now, they had a singular, highly publicized goal, which was to get their clients to the peak. But as they approached the summit, unexpected bottlenecks happened, and the weather started turning really fast. Standard mountaineering protocol dictates a very strict turnaround time, usually 2 p.m. Basically meaning if you haven't reached the top by then, you turn back. Period. You do it to survive the descent before dark. But the summit was just right there. It was so agonizingly close. Lured by that proximity and heavily invested in the objective, leaders and climbers fatally ignored those turnaround times. A massive storm rolled in, trapping the climbers in the death zone, and it resulted in one of the absolute most tragic disasters in Everest's history.
And this, brilliantly though tragically, illustrates a concept coined by organizational behavior expert D. Christopher Case. He calls it Goalodicy, which is literally a mashup of the words goal and idiocy. Goalodicy happens when an idealized future goal essentially destroys your capacity for rational risk evaluation. The Everest climbers were so totally bent on reaching the summit that they ignored the reality of their rapidly changing environment. They just didn't adapt. Their identity, their money, their pride, it was all tied up in that one specific target. The goal actually became more important than the survival tactics required by the very real situation right there on the ground.
Section 2. Rethinking the annual review. A fluid approach.
Now, thankfully, most of us aren't facing life or death situations at 29,000 feet. But this exact same rigid goal odyssey, it manifests constantly in the corporate workplace, particularly in how we manage performance. The traditional annual review is pretty much the corporate equivalent of that inflexible Everest goal. You know the drill. It's this anxiety-inducing, backward-looking event where managers act kind of like judges, just finding fault with the past year's performance. It assumes that the goals you set 12 entire months ago are still perfectly relevant, completely ignoring how the business environment might have shifted in the meantime. On the flip side, we have the modern alternative, continuous coaching. High-impact organizations have finally realized that performance management cannot be an annual trip to the dentist. It needs to be fluid, forward-looking, and developmental. It's an ongoing conversation that allows teams to actually adapt their targets as the landscape changes.
Section 3. Why fast beats smart. A better framework.
So, if the annual review is fundamentally broken, what about the actual goals we're setting in the first place? We've all been taught the absolute gold standard of goal setting, right? But recent research suggests we might have it entirely backward. We're talking about completely flipping traditional management wisdom on its head. For decades, we've been told to set SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. But according to researchers at the MIT Sloan School of Management, SMART goals actually cause companies to underperform. Crazy, right? Why? Well, because if a goal must be realistic and achievable, and especially if your yearly bonus is tied to hitting it 100%, you are naturally going to aim low. You're going to play it safe. The researchers suggest we need to totally abandon SMART and instead embrace fast goals.
FAST is an acronym for frequently discussed, ambitious, specific, and transparent. Let's break that down real quick. Frequently discussed means these goals are actually shaping your daily choices, not just sitting in a drawer until your annual review. Specific means you still map out the concrete metrics, often using things like OKRs or objectives and key results. But the real magic? That lies in the A and the T. Ambitious goals push you way out of your comfort zone. In fact, in Silicon Valley, many top-tier tech firms push their employees to set goals they are actually unlikely to achieve in full. Hitting 70% of an incredibly ambitious goal actually yields much higher overall performance than hitting 100% of a safe, mediocre one.
Now, the really crucial point here is transparency, the T in FAST. A recent study highlighted in that MIT research showed that over 90% of staffers actually prefer their goals to be completely transparent across the whole organization. Over 90%. When goals are kept private, which is super common with traditional SMART goals, employees are totally blind to what their colleagues are doing. Making goals transparent aligns the entire workforce. It fosters healthy competition, and it allows people to easily find mentors and see exactly how their specific daily work connects to the grander corporate strategy.
Section 4. The power of continuous coaching. Agile feedback loop.
Okay, so now that we've set these big, ambitious, transparent, fast goals, how do we actually manage them day in and day out without falling right back into the trap of Goalodicy? This brings us to the power of continuous coaching. I love this quote from senior analyst Stacia Sherman-Gar because it perfectly captures the mindset shift we need. She says, performance management is not something that high-impact organizations do, but is instead a way that work gets done. Basically, performance management isn't just a separate HR task you begrudgingly tick off on a Friday afternoon. It is the very bedrock of management itself. It literally is the work. It involves constant course correction, ongoing feedback, and helping your team navigate roadblocks in real time. To actually execute this kind of continuous coaching, teams have to master what researchers call proximal team learning. This is basically an agile feedback loop composed of 4 simple steps: talking it out, asking around for external info, writing it down to codify that knowledge, and trying it out to test the hypothesis. Think back to the Everest disaster we discussed earlier. If those climbing teams had actively engaged in proximal team learning, if they had just stopped, talked it out, adapted their knowledge to the worsening weather, and shifted their hypothesis from "we must summit at all costs" to "we need to survive the descent," they might have lived. Continuous coaching in the workplace utilizes this exact same fluid communication to prevent corporate Goalodicy.
Section 5. Kissing your ugly frogs. Overcoming negativity.
For our final section, we are moving from the macro organizational level all the way down to the deeply personal level. Because, let's be honest, ultimately mastering performance is an internal psychological game. You can have the absolute best corporate frameworks in the world, but if your mindset is blocked, your performance is going to suffer. To tackle this, we're turning to a pretty fun metaphor from personal development expert Brian Tracy, based on the classic fairy tale of the Princess and the Frog. He argues that to achieve our goals, we literally have to kiss our ugly frogs. Your frogs are all the mental baggage you carry around: negative people, past failures, current anxieties, and deeply ingrained self-limiting beliefs. The princess had to face the wet, slimy frog to get her prince, right? Well, you have to look your fears and negative emotions right in the eye, acknowledge them, and actively clear them out of your mental pond to make room for high performance.
One of the biggest, ugliest frogs we deal with is guilt and the fear of failure. This is exactly what often leads us to play it safe and stick to those uninspiring SMART goals. Tracy outlines some incredibly practical steps to eliminate guilt and take absolute 100% responsibility for your life. First, consciously modify your self-talk. Just flat out refuse to denigrate yourself. Second, stop criticizing others. Actively find positive things to say instead. Third, never use guilt to manipulate the people around you. And fourth, firmly, unequivocally, reject guilt when others try to place it onto you. When you drain the swamp of these negative emotions, you become a fully functioning, highly adaptable person capable of tackling truly ambitious, fast goals.
Which leaves us with this final, somewhat provocative thought to take with you today. Take a second and really reflect on your own current objectives. Are your goals driving you forward, or are they blinding you to the reality of your changing environment? Are you suffering from a case of Goalodicy, or are you staying agile? And most importantly, what ugly frog, what self-limiting belief or past failure do you need to kiss today so you can clear your mental pond and unlock your ultimate potential? Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer. I really hope it fundamentally shifts how you approach your next big summit. Keep learning, stay agile, and I'll see you next time.